additional information. So for me, I'm convinced that this activity has gone on and is still going on, that the ET phenomenon, or the UFO phenomenon in the UK and other parts of Europe at least, is linked to human mutilation cases. One of my objectives was to recover the photographs from the source, but these were not forthcoming. I have no reason to doubt Derek Goff was in possession of the images. At my time of meeting the military source, he seemed to flip-flop over the idea of giving me images of mutilation cases, which he explained he did have in his possession. Here is a list of information he relayed to me in a series of 5 meetings in the latter half of 2013. He joined the military when he was 17 straight from school and initially trained as a para. He was stationed at Hereford and they were asked if they wanted to volunteer for something different. 11 volunteers were picked out. It was a Special Forces Black Ops group under command of NATO in which the Yanks were in charge. Other countries' governments were aware of the operations, but most do not have the technology to deal with it, therefore allowed the Americans to get on with it under the umbrella of NATO. This includes the Russians. Whilst on an operation near the Russian border, a UFO came out of a cavern system and nearly took their heads off, upon which they opened fire. Opening fire would not usually affect a UFO. He thought that there would definitely be another group carrying out these operations today. The operation in Brecon Beacon, where the 2 bodies were discovered, was on Talibant Mountain. The military have secret systems based on a laser that can bring down UFOs. There are 8 around the world that he knew of, 2 in the UK, 1 in Germany and a few in the US. It disables or interferes with the propulsion of the UFO and causes them to come down. The military had an idea roughly as to where and when the UFOs were appearing and would send their team out in advance of firing this weapon. Once the evidence is secured, another totally separate team would come to the site. This could take days. They referred to that team as the collectors, who were always American. They would leave with the evidence and would just leave the find and secure team to fend for themselves. He is still in touch with some of the soldiers from his team, 2 of whom have now died. He has seen hundreds of UFOs, some landed and some in the sky. There was a variety of different shapes. They were not flying saucer shaped, some triangular, others square or rectangular, not aerodynamic shapes. They ranged in size from the size of a car to 3 times the size of an articulated lorry. The surfaces were smooth and some had overlapping tiles. They usually had lights on them of varying colours and configurations. One craft gave off a light like an arc welder and caused damage to their eyes, and he had to be admitted to hospital after that incident. Another craft which they got close to looked metallic, but when pushed by hand gave way, having some kind of elastic property which returned to the original shape after applying a force. He said he thought that because some of the craft were so small, there must be bigger mother-type ships which these craft had come from. I suggested that UFOs might use reservoirs as hiding places, and he said no, they don't go in reservoirs, although when asked where they do go, it seemed he wasn't sure. He said they just appear. He did not know where they were originating from, but stated they are here, meaning they are in our atmosphere regularly. He said they can just appear, and when asked about cloaking, confirmed that he thought they had those kind of abilities, and also incredible dynamics. He said they can come down to the ground very quick. The first operation he was involved with was in northern Scotland, and the largest recovery of bodies was in Australia, a case where 24 bodies had been left. Injuries are the same as animal mutilation type injuries. He said that internal organs would be removed and also brains. He seemed to think that anything connected with the nervous system is what they would take. He did not see a lot of blood on the corpses. They usually choose remote, out-of-the-way places to carry out human mutilations. They knew where to go and where to take from, where the people would not be missed for a long time. Bodies included people and children. He has multiple sclerosis and is on crutches. He has various scars, one of which he showed me on his right arm just below the elbow. He has 3 pins in his hip, he had work done on his shoulder and has had a knee replacement. His friends who were in the unit have had brain tumours and cancers. 2 are now dead. He said that he hasn't had cancer and then said, touch wood, indicating he is worried about it. I asked if he communicated with any of the ETs he claimed to have seen. He replied no. He said they were incredibly quick. They could move 60 metres in a split second. He said they are not friendly and you would not approach one. He saw two of them wearing what looked like a wetsuit or a flight suit. He said you could not approach them on your own. You needed cover because they were so quick. He said he witnessed 3 distinct types of ETs on these missions. He stated that in 4 or 5 of these cases there were craft debris and they were able to see what had been on board the craft. This included human and animal body parts. He claimed there is a UFO tracking facility in the military land at Sennybridge. It is stored under the ground and comes up at night. It consists of a large aerial, quite wide, about 50 to 60 metres high. It can be seen from the public road at night above the trees. There is also a radar dish that rotates, and it too only comes up at night. It is about the size of a car. The aerial is used somehow to track the UFOs. He believes there are more facilities like this elsewhere in the world. I showed him an image on my camera of where I thought the tracking system was located based on information from Derek Goff, and I did not have it quite right. It is actually behind the trees further back in this image I showed him. This site is very well monitored by CCTV. He said that a rabbit couldn't even get in there without being picked up. There is a public road where the facility can be seen, but he warned me, do not go along the road that goes to the facility at night under any circumstances, implying that would be very dangerous. He claims the underground facility there goes down 10 levels. He left the forces in 1999, but still has contact with the base. He said he thought this issue was being covered up in order to keep control of society. He mentioned religion and how that might be affected. He also mocked much of the information that exists in the UFO field, stating that much of it is put out to confuse and mislead the public. He said he felt the problem might be getting bigger and also that it could not be kept secret forever. He thought the information might at some point come out officially. After the meetings with the military source, I continued to request further meetings with him to try and obtain the photographs, but neither further meetings nor photographs were forthcoming. It was clear he had gone cold on me. Skeptics will undoubtedly now say, how do we know the military source was telling the truth? This, of course, is a valid point, but if one looks at the surrounding circumstantial evidence, such as the attempts to silence and discredit Derek Goff, the fact that after 16 years of silence the military source repeated exactly the same story to me, his initial reaction when I contacted him, the fear he had of being recorded, his injuries, his knowledge of military groups and operations, and his access to photographs of mutilated bodies, all these point to the story, incredible though it is, being genuine. During my visits to South Wales I did take some footage near where the alleged tracking facility is located. I'm just at the bottom of the military road and it says military road ahead, open to public unless otherwise stated. So
forward U-turn.
Road open. So this is saying it's okay. Now as I said, yeah, we've got the cattle grid here and the facility, it's just down there. Dare I go down there? Dare I go down there? No entry except for MOD traffic. See, could be anything there. Derek Goff has told me some information about who he handed stuff to, and one of them is a guy called Neil Spring, who had connections with Oxford University. Yes, and he's supposedly given Neil Spring some of the audio tapes of Goff talking to the NATO guy, but I think Goff says that they went missing from Neil Spring's locker. So he lost those audio tapes. So did you have some correspondence with Neil Spring, David?
I'm assuming Neil Spring lives in South Wales, close to Derek Goff, right. Or to, sorry, David Coggins. Because I wasn't sure how they got to know each other. Right. Anyway, I think it's because he lives in South Wales and close by. Yeah. So Oxford University had a year or two ago formed a new UFO group, and they had speakers and talks, and they invited Graham Birdsall to come and speak, who was the past editor of the Quest International UFO magazine and director of Quest International. And at some point in the proceedings, Neil Spring apparently took Graham to one side and whispered something to him like, you know, I think you ought to know about this. Mm-hmm. So he was acquainting Graham of his knowledge from those audio tapes, thinking Graham might do something with it. And I think at that time, when he got back to Yorkshire, to Leeds, Tony Dodd had actually left and resigned his position with Quest International. So he thought, I would be the appropriate person to pass this message on and a phone number. So I did ring him, and with the hope that he would furnish me with a copy of these tapes. And he referred to this third person, which is obviously this army chap that you've identified, and said it's more than his life's worth to pass them over, which is a bit strange when he's already had them and David Coggins has already had access to them. He wouldn't give me the contact number of this military guy, or even David Coggins, because he didn't know that I didn't know David Coggins at the time, which I didn't. So
I think you and I are both of the same mindset, that we don't make a judgment as to the true motives or the reasons behind this. We're looking at the evidence. All right. Now, yes. The knee-jerk response is, whoever's doing this, it's an absolute evil thing, which it appears to be on the surface. It's not benevolent in any way. Now, there's quite a large school of thought in this field of ufology, which is that no non-human intelligence would ever harm another intelligence, shall we say.
Yes.
So they're all benevolent, in other words. And this is put forward by people such as Dolores Cannon and Stephen Greer. Stephen Greer is also of that same mindset.
Yeah.
Now, I don't make a judgment as to why they're doing this and what the ultimate reason is, but Greer in particular has been making noises recently about the reasons for this. Just tell us a bit about that, David.
Yes, so he's issued a paper, which was issued on 31st of August, so very recently. I haven't read the whole paper, I've only read the extracts, which has been circulating around in the last week on the internet. And he's, I mean, I agree with some of his comments in the sense that he's postulating that this unseen government and, you know, the industry and the money, financial institutions and the oil barons and all the rest of it are leading up to some false flag case where they might do things to replicate what the ETs are doing, to put the fear of God into everybody, to make the general populace think we've got a threat from an outside source off planet.
Yeah. So they might fabricate an alien threat.
Yes, yes.
And so his hypothesis is that anything that seems to be evil connected with unexplained UFO type phenomenon is all a psyop.
Yes,
that's what he's saying.
He's saying that the evil people are the government agencies, or whoever these people are, or orchestrating and ordering this sort of activity to fool the public and the media. You know,
my response to that would be, well, okay, why have they got a NATO group being set up, which is covert apart from the one whistleblower that we've had, to tidy up after human mutilation cases? Why does the military need their own group to keep it secret and keep it covered up and take away the evidence and seal off the area and all the rest of it? Why do they need that group? Just look at the case on Filey Beach. Is Stephen Gray saying that the military did that seal?
Yeah.
That was just so happened to be found one morning by a couple of people walking past on Filey Beach. Yeah. And there are cases all over the world as well.
Yes, well, there's a case Tony reported, and it's in his book, on beaches, adjacent beaches in the Orkney Islands in 1994, 93, over 30 seals found, with all decapitated, but that cut through the same vertebrae joint in the neck.
And I mean, I've just think of the Dalby Forest cases. Is he saying then that the US military is running around Dalby Forest or acquiring animals from all different sources? Some of them farm animals. You've got sheep, you've got, well, there was a donkey, there's a fox, a badger, all with the same sort of similar injuries in a pile. in Dalby Forest, and the military are doing that deliberately so that someone might just by accident come across them and then tell Tony Dodd, who several years later might just so happen to write about it in his book, and then we might talk about it in an interview just to scare the public to think that that ETs are evil.
Yeah.
Is that contrived or what?
Yes.
Is it not more likely that this is some unexplained phenomenon that is going on in the UK and other parts of the world?
I mean, Stephen Gray is postulating that some of these are done by the military, replicating animal mutilations and abductions. And I think to myself, how can the military... I don't think they've got the expertise. I mean, thinking of what Professor Fremont has said, that A, there'd have to be more skilled than Professor Tony Fremont, and how many people in the ranks wearing a uniform in the United States Army or the Air Force or even the Navy have got this expertise to replicate what the aliens are doing to animals or even human beings. So I don't think his reasoning stands up to scrutiny, to be honest.
Putting forward this argument that all ETs would have to be benevolent, that is possibly some kind of psyop in itself, in that, in my view, that at some level the NSA or whoever have had some contact with the groups that are possibly doing this, and maybe even have knowledge of it. I mean, Goff said that they had advanced warning of what day there was going to be UFO activity and would specifically monitor the situation on certain days. They knew when mutilations were more likely than others.
Right.
They knew which days. So that suggests to me there's been some communication at some level. And going to the Dan Sherman interview, he also alleged that they were in cahoots to some degree. I mean, we don't know exactly what that is, but perhaps this is a way of them, I don't know, watering down or playing down the seriousness of what's really going on. What are your thoughts on that, David? Do you think it's an entirely separate thing that they just haven't got control over?
It's possible. I think maybe some historical deals have been struck with maybe one group of aliens. I mean, what we all keep forgetting, including me, there's not just one alien species out there visiting Earth. There might be 30 or more. I mean, Tony thought there were more than 30. So they've all got slightly different agendas, and they might need the organs and tissue and the blood from lots of animals, and the same for a number of human beings, to do what they need to do, which might even be, in the long term, be for the good of us all. I mean, that's conjecture on my part, but there must be a purpose and a reason to keep on doing this. And I think that the authorities in the 50s or wherever any deals may have been struck, the aliens have possibly reneged a bit on the promises, or we may have as well, exchanging information, technologies which would be useful to us and American.
I mean, clearly, if the Goff story is entirely true, which I suspect it is, then they haven't. Our own military, NATO, whichever group's in charge of it, haven't got control of it. Otherwise, they wouldn't need a group to go around running after
sweeping up the mess,
and then hiding it from the public. So they've not got a handle on it.
No,
which they would definitely. We know that they've covered up on animal mutilation, and as Tony says in his book, this is an even higher level cover up.
Yes.
For obvious reasons, I suppose. I mean, I don't agree with covering it up, and I don't think you do either.
No.
But people in positions of power, they probably wouldn't want to share that information.
No. I mean, Stevie Greer is a very persuasive, strong character. Quite bullish, in my opinion. And he's dictatorial a bit, perhaps, like you follow my line or you don't type of thing, and he's got his own agenda anyway. He runs tours which earns him an income for taking people on contacts and sessions to meditate at some place in the States, which he regularly uses, which he charges, I guess, quite a few $100s a throw for that.
They try and make telepathic contact with extraterrestrials.
Yes, and they get lights responses and so on, and people get excited about that. So he doesn't want to show the aliens in a bad light, because that would frighten people off going on to these special tours of trips and meditation and making contact with the aliens, or a particular group of aliens, which might be quite friendly towards us earthlings in that particular location. I don't know, but he's trying to put this overall umbrella up, that they're all not here to do us any harm, and they're all here for our benefit. And it may be that for our benefit they have to take so many animals and all this blood and guts, if you like, even from human beings, to something to do with preserving our planet and us as a human being, the human race, in the future. So it might be sacrifices, people might say, have to be made for the good of the rest of us. And also they want to preserve this planet. So when you think that the United States government, or whoever they are, have killed all those people on 9/11,